my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt-Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place for women to come together to share their childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from women all over the world. Today's episode is sponsored by Creighton Kids. Creighton Kids is all about empowering the self-expression of families through environments that spark creativity and encourage individuality. Their versatile collection celebrates each new stage and helps you design a nursery that's an extension of your own personal style. You can use the code THEBIRTHHOUR at checkout to receive 10% off your full price purchase of kids furniture and more at CreightonKids.com. It's valid online only and some exclusions apply, so see their website for details. At the end of this episode, I'll be talking about layering on finishing touches to create a nursery where style and personality shine through with Creighton Kids' very own senior kids stylist, Kim Doran. A couple of quick announcements are that the Know Your Options Childbirth course is still available at $100 off with the coupon code 100OFF, and you can find that by going to thebirthhour.com/course. And then if you're interested in becoming a listener supporter, you can do that at patreon.com/birthhour. As a listener supporter, you get lots of awesome perks, including access to our archived episodes, membership in our private Facebook group, and then bonus content each month, including expert interviews and Ask Me Anythings with me. We also have a huge giveaway coming up just for our patrons. You have a better chance of having your birth story shared as a patron. We have a separate submission form for them, and we choose 2 every month from our Patreon group. And lots of other fun things happening over there. So again, that's patreon.com/birthhour. Today's guest is Aubrielle, and she's going to share her experience with an unmedicated hospital birth, as well as returning to work postpartum as a single mom. She's a nurse working in the hospital during COVID-19, so she has a very unique experience to share with that as well. Hi, Aubrielle. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. Will you start by telling listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Okay, so I'm Aubrielle. I'm 23 years old. I am a single mom to one baby girl, Olivia Wren. She turned 4 months on May 28th. We lived in eastern Arkansas in a really small town called Mariana. And I am a labor and delivery nurse for a little over a year now. And then I had some background as a doula prior to that.
Oh, very cool. I always love hearing that perspective too.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's start with finding out you were pregnant and how your pregnancy went with her.
Okay. So I think I should take it back a little further than before I found out I was pregnant. Sorry. So when I was 15 years old, I was having like some issues with abdominal pain, and like for some reason we could not figure out what it was. And then eventually found out that I had dermoid ovarian cysts. And so by the time that we figured it out, they were pretty far along, and I went in for surgery, and I was told that we would know if I would come out with ovaries, basically. So we went in, I came out, they were able to save one, but it still was pretty cystic for, the rest of my life. It's been like that. And then a few years ago, I was told that that tube was also blocked. So I thought that I was not going to be able, like my OBGYN told me that I would need help to have a baby. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't exactly preventing because I didn't need to, supposedly.
Yeah.
So when I found out I was pregnant, I was about 4 months into my first nursing job in labor and delivery. It was a complete surprise. My niece was visiting me in Memphis, Tennessee, because that's where I had just moved to. And I was having all these different symptoms, and she's like, "You're pregnant." And I'm like, literally impossible to know. And then she left, and a couple days later, I could not get out of bed. And so in between naps, I got up, took a test just because. I'm like, it's definitely negative, but it was definitely positive. Oh and it didn't take, long for it to even show up. So yeah, that was finding out that I was pregnant. I was super shocked, but very excited and, felt super grateful, even though circumstances weren't the best.
Yeah. Did you talk to your OBGYN? Like, hey.
Oh my gosh, yes. So I was working at the hospital where my OBGYN worked.
Okay.
And so we were, kind of cool. And I had just told her, like, I had seen her for my Well Woman visit, and I was like, oh, no, I don't need birth control either. It'll be fine. And then, so, of course, I went to her and she's like, Abria. I'm like, I know, but I thought, she wasn't the one who told me that I couldn't have a baby. Yeah. This was in Arkansas that someone else told me that.
Okay.
And so, yeah, she was like, well, let's do it. And I had always planned to like have midwifery care during pregnancy, but when I was in college, I believe I was a sophomore, I was told that I was a type 2 diabetic. And so that just kind of, even though my levels were, well controlled, like my A1C is a 5 now, and the pre-diabetic range is like 6.4. So anyway, in my head, I just automatically like threw away the idea of like midwifery care because we don't have a ton of options. And then I also didn't want to come out of my pocket for much because I was a single mom. And so I just decided to stick with my OB. I liked her. I liked her practice. Her practice was an all female, all African-American female practice. And so that felt really important to me.
And you worked with her like on a regular basis, right?
Yes, cool. All of them. It was really nice.
Yeah.
Super grateful for that. And so, yeah, I just decided, I'd stay with her and it'd be fine. I knew that, the nurses would be the ones kind of not that I wasn't in control of my own experience, but like the doctor didn't have as much influence on my labor and delivery experience as my nurses would. And they were all my friends. So I wasn't
get some good care.
Yes. I was like, I'm not worried about, delivering there. All throughout my pregnancy, we would talk about, and even before I was pregnant, they knew I was kind of quote unquote crunchy. And so they knew what I liked. Like they stuck the natural patience on me because they're like, you can handle this. You know what you're doing. And so they knew, kind of what I wanted my experience to look like. And so I felt safe, having a hospital delivery as opposed to seeking midwifery care.
All right. And how did you feel throughout your pregnancy?
I was sick as a dog, Ren.
No.
I had hyperemesis and I ended up losing 30 pounds.
Wow. And like the early first trimester? Or?
No, the entire time. I couldn't eat. I couldn't gain weight. And even after I had her, it took me a few weeks to be able to really eat again. I think I just had a little PTSD. But I was super sick all the time. I was still working full time, night shift, 12 hours a shift. And I was on like Zofran. I tried Unisum and B12, essential oils, like ginger, anything you can name. I tried it, but it just didn't work. And they offered me a Zofran pump, but I'm like, I think that's a bit much. Like, I know I'm still losing weight, but like if it keeps going, if I hit like the 35-pound mark, then we can talk about it. But eventually, it kind of, the weight loss stopped, even though I still wasn't eating, and it was fine.
Did you have to get like IV fluids and stuff?
I did once. I probably should have gone more often, but as a nurse, you're kind of like, I don't want to be a bother. So I kind of, toughed it out at home. And so I ended up being fine. So about 22 weeks, I wasn't throwing up like 8 times a day anymore. It did get a little bit better, but the appetite just still wasn't there. So, I mean, it did get better, kind of. But then I started having contractions. So, it was just like never-ending list of things.
Sounds like it. Yeah. So when did you start having contractions? Were they like the Braxton Hicks contractions?
No, so they were like true contractions. I thought that they were Braxton Hicks, and I'm like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. But then, like during my shifts, I would kind of have to like stop and breathe through them, and I'm like, oh, maybe this is something more. And so eventually, I went to the doctor, and she didn't like check me or anything the first time I complained about it, but because she knew, that I knew what a contraction was and stuff like that. So she put me on Procardia, a medication. It's actually a blood pressure medication, but it would help me with preterm contractions. And so I took that up until probably 36 weeks. And then I was like, it's fine. We can have a baby soon. And then she checked I'm lying. She did check my cervix. Sorry. And I wasn't dilated. So then she just prescribed me the low dose Procardia. But then eventually I did start dilating, but it still wasn't, like anything scary for us. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, is there anything else from your pregnancy that you want to share?
Just that I started as soon as I knew I was pregnant, like the same day I got the test, the positive result, I started looking for a doula. And because I had just moved to Memphis, I didn't have any connections. I didn't really know anyone. And so I just did a Google search, and there didn't seem to be many options, which now that I kind of have a community, I realize that that's not true. It's just that Google was not giving me what I needed to see.
Yeah.
But I did hire a doula. I believe I was 11 weeks when I hired her.
Okay.
Yeah, she was great. She had 6 children of her own. She had breastfed those babies. She had home births. And she didn't know that I knew this about her. And she's going to probably freak when she hears this. But her birth photos had gone viral a bit before I found out I was pregnant. And I learned that her husband had passed away. And so she had to navigate pregnancy and birth without a partner. And I also was doing the same, even though, my baby's father wasn't he didn't pass away. He still wasn't there. And so that felt super, it felt, like divine intervention. This was probably supposed to happen. So
yeah,
that was great.
So, so you hired her around 11 weeks, and then was she someone that you went to for support throughout your pregnancy too?
So this part, no, because I still was she was very supportive. She was there, but I was in such a state of shock that I couldn't really wrap my head around the fact that I'm the one having the baby. I'm the one that should be seeking support.
Yeah.
So if I had a question, she was there, and she was on me about visits and things. And I just couldn't wrap my head around you need to be preparing to push a baby out of your body. This is, it just was very hard for me to accept. It was imposter syndrome to the fullest. But she was definitely present. She just kind of had to tell me accept this help. It's your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think that's because you were caring for, pregnant people every day and at other people's births all the time with your work? It's hard to imagine yourself in that position.
I think for so long, I didn't believe that I would be a mom, and especially not this easily, not a mom to children that I would birth. And so it was just hard to kind of unlearn that untruth,
Yeah. All right. Well, let's hear how labor started for you.
Okay. So I was living in Memphis and working there, and I had planned to work up until 40 weeks because I'm I'm going to go until 42 weeks. This is my first baby. I'm going to labor for 3 days. This is going to be a journey. And I was a type 2 diabetic, so I was seeing maternal fetal medicine, and they kind of mentioned to me that they wanted to induce. And I'm well, my levels are fine. I don't think that I want to do that. So I definitely thought that I was going to be pregnant for years. Well, I was in Arkansas at my mom's house on the night of January 27th, and I was full of anxiety. I was, crying and just super all over the place and feeling like I could not go on with this pregnancy. It has to be over soon. I don't know how I'm going to keep working. And looking back, I don't feel like I was going through a ton. So I don't know where the anxiety came from. My coworkers were super helpful. It wasn't terrible enough for me to be crying on the couch, over ice cream. But I had so much anxiety, and I remember praying and asking God, you have to relieve me of this. Surely the end is near, because this is just wild. I can't imagine having to continue working and, going through this pregnancy. But I also was afraid of what birth would look like. I was going to be moving from Memphis back to Arkansas to be closer to family and to have help with the baby. And so there were a lot of unknowns. But, I prayed about it, and I kind of just, figured I would let it go and put it in God's hands and let that be it. Well, I woke up the next morning on the 28th, and I went to the bathroom, and my underwear were kind of wet. And I'm this is interesting. But maybe I just peed on myself. My bladder's weak when I throw up. So maybe it's just weak all the time now. And it took me 30 to 45 minutes to figure out that my water had broken, because it wasn't a continuous gush. The bed wasn't wet or anything. And also I was 37 weeks even. So I just was it's too soon. it's my first baby. She's not going to come early. And so I called my mom. She was at work in another town. It was only about 25 minutes away. But I'm like, I think my water broke. And she's like, okay, well, you got to know for sure because I would have to leave work and get a substitute teacher. So you got to tell me. And I'm like, just get in the car because I think it is, but like, I don't know. So anyway, that was around 6:30 that I found out that it was broken. And we started getting ready to travel back to Memphis. I had to go to Memphis where my hospital was, but also my hospital bag was at my house there. So I needed to stop there. I also decided that I needed to stop at Target to pick up the bra that I'd ordered to labor in. And so we left my hometown probably around 9:00 and got to Memphis. I went to Target, kind of had a little panic attack on the inside because I picked up my bra and I turned around. I'm at the customer service checkout. And so I turn around and my mom's gone and I'm calling her phone and she's not answering. Long story short, she was over looking at like shoes. And I'm like, Mom, my water is broken. I'm in the middle of Target by myself. What are you doing? And I had a little freak out about that. I was pretty upset with her, but then, it passed. All this time I wasn't contracting. Like I said, I had been having contractions before and they were pretty intense, especially when I was working. But these contractions, I could just barely, tell that they were even happening. So I was like, that's strange. But I mean, maybe they're on the way. So anyway, we get to the hospital around 10:40 and I check in and my labor nurses, of course, I know them. So she's like really slow about, getting me in and stuff. It's just really chill. And by 11:45, I think the doctor had, given orders to admit me and things like that. And because I was 37 weeks, we didn't have my Group B strep results back yet, even though I had begged the nurse practitioner to test me because I'm like, she might come, because I was 2 centimeters dilated. And I know that means nothing, but like in my heart, I'm like, well, it could, So no, we didn't have my results and we needed to start antibiotics. And so we did that. And then she asked me if I would like to start Pitocin. And at this point, it was around like 1:00. And so my water had been broken since at least 6:30 that morning. And I still wasn't contracting very much. So I'm like, yeah, let's go ahead and get this show on the road. I don't know. It seemed to me like waiting and potentially, being ruptured forever and ever seemed like a bigger risk than starting an induction, basically. And so we started the Pitocin around 1:00 and we kept increasing it because I just wasn't feeling anything, still wasn't contracting super regularly. And then and I'm sorry, when I checked in, I was 3 centimeters, 80% effaced. The baby had always been pretty low. And so I'm like, okay, like that's a decent starting point. Cool. So then we started the Pitocin at 1:00 and at 4:39, I remember vividly, I had my first painful contraction and it took my breath away. And I'm like, oh, this baby's about to come out. This must be it. And so I had her about 20 minutes after that. I had my labor nurse check me and she was like, oh, you're kind of a 4. And I know as a labor nurse, when I say that to somebody, it's like, you made enough change for me to like tell there's a difference, but you're not really, you're not like a true 4. And so I texted my doula and I was, telling her like, I just feel a little discouraged, even though it had only been 20 minutes of pain. Now looking back, I'm like, that was so irrational of you. But, I was a little discouraged. And she's like, that doesn't mean anything. Things can change so fast. Like, don't worry about it. And she kept asking me if I wanted her to come over. Because at that point, I had been there 6 hours. And so I'm like, no, it's still very early. Like, I should be resting. And I kind of had a headache. So I'm like, I'm going to sleep in between contractions. And she's like, okay, well, I really think you should be up and moving. And my mom was saying the same thing. She's like, you should have the doula come. And I'm like, no, it's fine. It's too early. I don't want her here for 2 days with me. I don't want to put her through that. We'll just wait. Long story short, around 5:20, I texted her and I'm like, okay, you should probably start heading here. And the shift changed around 7. She got there probably around 6:30. And right before she got there at 7, I did opt for a dose of Stadol. which is an IV medication. It doesn't make, for me, it didn't make the pain go away. It kind of just made me unable to react to the pain that I was feeling. And I hated that. Like, I just did not like it at all. And it's the only thing about my birth story that I would change. So anyway, I remember the nurse pushing it in, and I felt something else shift. And I was like, oh, my baby's probably coming soon. We probably shouldn't have done that, because we usually don't give it once you're past about 6 centimeters, or once you make it to 6 centimeters. We don't give it because we don't want baby to be sleepy when they come out. And I'm like, oh, we probably shouldn't have done that. But anyway, we did it. My doula comes in right after. And I had always imagined like wanting like this huge party for my birth and like wanting everybody around me. But I was so like focused inward, and that's not like me at all. Like, I'm always like, leaning on someone else for support, but I really just kind of wanted to be alone. And like, I didn't shoo anybody away, but I did find myself kind of like, just kind of balling up in the corner of the bed and, not really opening my eyes to see or speak with anybody. So anyway, my doula, she would rub me, and, she set up the diffuser, and she was like trying to meet these needs for me, but I just could not even like focus to, let her know what those, were, or to allow her in to meet those needs. But I do remember at one point my contractions were horrible, and I was like pressing my feet into her thighs. She must have thighs of steel, because I was sure I was going to break them. And like, I'd have a contraction and I'd just push into my feet. I don't know what that was. And, I talk to people all the time about like not holding on to tension during contractions, and all of that just went out of the window completely for me. I was like, I need to fight something. It's not the contraction that I'm fighting, but I'm just gonna kind of fight my doula. It's fine. That's going to help me through this. And so it worked for us. And, yeah. So then I guess around probably like 7:45, my new nurses had come on by this time, and these were my best friends. So my best friend, Tamika, was my nurse, and she checked me, and I was like 7 centimeters, and I'm like, okay, like finally we're getting somewhere. And then all of a sudden I something else shifted, and I couldn't really pinpoint what was happening. Like, I had imagined that not having an epidural, I would always be able to say exactly what was happening. Like, I would be super in tune with my body, and it just wasn't like that for me. It just felt like so many things were happening to me that I couldn't call them out. So anyway, she asked me if I was feeling pushy, and I'm like, no, I don't know. And then, of course I let out that groan, and they're like, yeah, you are. So about 8:00, she checked me again, and she's like, oh, she's right there. You're complete. And so at that point, I just start pushing. Like, I did not care where the doctor was. We always keep a hospitalist on staff. So there's a doctor who's not associated with any one practice, but they stay in labor and delivery for us if we need them. And so I knew it was Dr. Gray there. So I'm like, I'm just going to push. Somebody will catch the baby, surely. And so they called the group that I was seeing, because my doctor wasn't on call. It was someone else, but she was still just as great. They called her, let her know that I was complete and natural and that she should head this way. She's like, okay. But then they went and got Dr. Gray just in case. So anyway, I immediately start pushing, and it felt like she took so long to come out. And I had them look back at my strip, and I had only pushed for 14 minutes. But it felt like a lifetime. And I just remember pleading with her, like, Olivia, please, you have to come out now. Like, it's time. Like, I need you here. And I remember asking Dr. Gray, the hospitalist, like, I'm going to push and you just grab her, okay? And he's like, that's not how this works. And I'm like, but it could, right? Like, we could do it if we wanted to. And he's like, no. And I was also still kind of loopy from the Stadol. Like, I was very much so in pain, but kind of talking a lot more than I usually would have. And so he just kind of stood back, and they knew that I wanted to catch her and put her skin to skin. And, sometimes we grab a blanket, put a blanket on top of mom, a towel, and dry baby off and stimulate baby. But I'd wanted to do all of that myself, and I didn't want a towel or anything between us. I wanted it on top of the both of us. So long story short, after what felt like hours of pushing, but only turned out to be 14 minutes, she came out. I was able to pull her up to my chest myself. And she was pretty quiet, and I figured she would be because I've gotten that dose of Stadol just an hour before I had her. But my friend Cammie, like, listened to her lungs. She sounded good, and so I just kept, like, rubbing her head and things. And I was just, again, so shocked that this was my baby and that I was a mom. So I have a video where my niece is like, "Why are you looking at her like that?" And I'm like, "I don't know." She was like, I'm like, "It's not her, it's me." But I don't know what's going on. I just had this baby that I wasn't ever supposed to have. And so yeah, it was a pretty trippy experience.
Just like, who are you?
Yes,
kind of look.
And I've wondered if I didn't feel instantly connected to her, like I loved her, but it still felt like I didn't actually have a baby. And I wonder if that was the Stadol kind of like, breaking that connection. Like I loved her and I was so excited to meet her, but it still didn't, I didn't have that rush of emotions like most people do. And I am a crybaby by nature. So I just knew that the moment I saw my baby for the first time, I was going to be a mess. And I was not. And maybe I was just like in my nurse brain and wondering why she wasn't crying and, trying to get her to, perk up a little bit for me. So maybe that was it too. Who knows?
Well, how was your recovery?
So right after I had her, my placenta took a little bit to come out, maybe a couple minutes. Again, time is a bit foggy. But when it did come out, I had this horrible pain on my right side. And they started examining me, and I don't remember exactly what Dr. Gray said. My doctor still hadn't made it yet, or the doctor for my group. But once she came in, she was like, "Oh, I think her uterus is just retroverted." I don't remember what made them know that, but something was kind of off. And so I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it's been like that for years." And she's like, "Oh, okay, well, she's fine." But then I started bleeding a little bit, and I never did. I mean, I didn't didn't hear them say what the cause of that was, but they did end up giving me Methergin, which is just a little shot in my thigh to kind of help that bleeding. And eventually it tapered off. I did stay in recovery. We usually go up to postpartum about an hour after you have the baby, but I stayed down there a couple hours extra. But it resolved pretty quickly, and I didn't have any tears. I had like this one abrasion that they didn't have to repair or anything. But later on, I remember like it being horrible. Like every time I went to the bathroom, it hurt so bad. And I also had like a tailbone injury that I didn't really get checked out because I'm like, well, even if it's like broken, what can we do about it? So it's fine. So recovery was okay. I ached like normal, I feel like. And I also had a lot of appointments once I'd left the hospital. Had a lot of appointments for the baby, and so I would have to travel from Arkansas back to Memphis, Tennessee. And so on those days that I did that, I did feel kind of, set back a little bit. I would hurt a little more, bleed a little more, but it wasn't, terrible.
So it was an hour and a half drive each way.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And I think the first one of my mom came with me, but then after that she had to return to school. So it was just me and the baby, which doesn't sound that safe when I say it now, but I mean, we were fine.
Oh, and then you said that it took a little while for you to get your appetite back even after she was born.
Yeah. And so I was really worried about that. Like I bought all these snacks, like almonds and stuff to try to, keep something on my stomach and keep getting calories because I was breastfeeding on demand. But yeah, the urge just wasn't there. And I think it was just because I was so used to throwing up and I could only eat a couple foods when I was pregnant. And even those still kind of made me sick. So I just didn't really want to touch much else. And I was pretty worried about how that would affect my supply, but it didn't. So I guess the almonds worked. And I did eat a lot of oatmeal too. I love oatmeal, and that was easy to keep down.
Yeah. Well, how did you feel emotionally just becoming a mom and then a single mom, and how long did you have before you went back to work?
I was on cloud 9 about being a mom. It was the best thing that had ever happened to me. But at the same time, I had imagined, a certain picture for my life. And I didn't have that, with her dad not being in the picture. So I did have some, moments where I was pretty, felt pretty worn down by the idea of not having that perfect family for her, that even I had growing up. I'm like, I don't know, what it's like to grow up without a dad. So how am I going to walk her through this? But we have a pretty incredible village. So, we've been working through that, and it's been fine. We're good.
And how long did you have of a maternity leave?
Okay, so I had originally planned to stay off work for 14 weeks, and short-term disability and PTO just ran out a lot quicker than that. So at 7 weeks and 5 days, I returned to work in Memphis, and I kind of, had a hunch that I would have to leave that job in Memphis to be somewhere closer to home so that I didn't have to, make that drive and I wasn't so far away from the baby every shift. So I went back early because I wanted to, I didn't want to just up and leave them after, my maternity leave. So I went back to Memphis at 7 weeks, 5 days. It was pretty much right in the middle of COVID-19. We had started limiting visitors. Our patients could only have one support person with them for the entire visit, and they were allowed to come and go at that time, which didn't make much sense, but we just went with it. And we still weren't making patients wear masks or anything like that. So, things were kind of getting crazy in other parts of the world, but in Memphis, we were kind of, a little protected from most of that, especially in labor and delivery. We just kind of, it wasn't as big of a threat, didn't seem as big of a threat to us.
Yeah, that's a lot to have to worry about, though. I mean, it's already hard going back to work after you have a baby and then all the COVID stuff.
Yes. So we would get patients on a rotation, like, whoever got rid of their patient, would get another one, blah, blah, blah. And so I would just sit and pray and cross my fingers, like, I hope I don't get like a possible COVID because I have a new baby at home. Like I can't risk taking that back to her. But my coworkers were super, great about sharing that load, for me and for Olivia's sake.
And then did you end up finding a job closer to home, or are you still in that process?
I did. I stayed there for 3 weeks, and then I transferred to another job that's about 20 minutes away from where I live. So I went from an hour and a half to a 20-minute commute. And it's a very small hospital. I went from delivering like 400 babies a month to about 70.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So It's been a huge change. So even like we're wearing masks, all the time, and patients are wearing masks, and they can only have one visitor as well. But this hospital already had kind of strict visitation policies, whereas where I came from, we, had parties for births. But yeah, so we are still pretty much doing the same thing. We have to wear N95s for deliveries and epidurals and things like that. But like outside of that, we can wear a regular surgical mask.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to share about your experience?
I do want to share that my baby, I noticed in the hospital that she was a little bit tanned. And so anytime we see a baby that has a tan, we automatically think jaundice. And so I can't remember exactly what her levels were, but they were a bit elevated. But my pediatrician, the pediatrician that I had chosen, I chose her because she was an IBCLC, and she also had one in her practice. And so she was pretty conservative. I feel like all the crunchy mamas in Memphis see her. And so she was pretty conservative. And so even though my baby's levels were a little bit elevated, we kind of, and she was almost a preterm, they decided to treat her conservatively. So they watched her for a little bit, but we went home like normal. And she stayed yellow for quite a few weeks, I think, until she was like 10 weeks. And maybe they just like trusted me to like watch, to know what signs to watch for because I was a labor and delivery nurse. And I mean, she ended up being fine, but I feel like that was just something I didn't expect. I didn't expect her to be yellow for so long. And so I kind of worried about it, more than I thought I would, but she was fine. And I don't think I hear a lot about, experiences with babies who have jaundice.
Yeah, I haven't ever heard of it lasting that long either.
So I read up on it, and I had seen where like sometimes it does take 12 weeks for them to completely, lose that yellow undertone. And maybe I was like hyper aware, more aware than most people. But yeah, she stayed kind of yellow for a little bit. And I would just like, kind of sit her in the sun in the window, and she was breastfeeding on demand and pooping great. And she wasn't lethargic or anything like that. So they're like, she's fine, just keep feeding her and she'll keep pooping and you'll be great. Yeah. It just took a time for, that tint to kind of wash away. And I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it sounds like you knew everything to do, which is great that you were able to do that at home, especially with that long drive to get to the visits.
It was pretty helpful. And we were already making so many visits. At the first, I believe it was her second visit, we found out that she had a heart murmur. And then she also wasn't gaining weight. And so she hadn't lost any, but she just hadn't gained any either. And they were a little bit concerned about that. Oh, this is what I wanted to tell you. I remember. I ended up having like a kind of a formilk imbalance. So my baby I had a, just ridiculous letdown. And so she would only eat for like 5 to 10 minutes at most. She rarely ate for a full 10 minutes. And then she'd be done. And, she'd go as long as any baby, between feedings. And I figured out kind of on my own that I would try to switch breasts in that, 5 to 8 minutes. And apparently she just wasn't getting enough of my hind milk. I know some people believe that like that's not a thing, but I think it was because she had like horrible reflux. She wasn't gaining weight. But then I started block feeding, which was suggested by a former postpartum nurse that I knew, started block feeding. So I would only feed her on one side. And if she ate any more within about 3 to 4 hours, I would still only feed her from the same side. And some people, have issues with getting engorged if they, try that, or, they dry up kind of. But it ended up working for us, and she immediately started gaining weight and her reflux symptoms decreased. So that's another thing I had no clue about. Like I felt pretty well versed in breastfeeding and postpartum stuff, and I had no clue that block feeding was,
yeah,
going to be so helpful.
Yeah, that's something that probably doesn't ever come up, while patients are still in the hospital. It's something you kind of figure out once milk is fully in and baby gets into their patterns and whatnot.
Yes. And I also want people to know that sometimes your baby won't eat for 20 minutes and they'll still be full.
Yeah. It's really helpful to see a lactation consultant for that too, because they can do the weighted feeding where they weigh them before you feed and weigh them after, and it lets you see how many ounces they took in and kind of gives you a peace of mind, I think.
Yes, and she was amazing. She was like an older lady, like felt like she could be my grandma. Like she wasn't that old, but she was just like a warm hug. It's kind of what her personality was like. And so she's like, I've seen a baby take 6 ounces in less than 10 minutes from their mom, So like, don't worry, don't look at the time. Like you can try to encourage her to eat longer, but she's gaining weight. She's pooping. She's fine. And so I really needed to hear that, because we talk about variations of normal, but then when it was me, it's like, but no, that can't be normal.
Right.
And it was. It was.
Yeah, I have the same thing with the letdown. And one thing that helped me that I figured out a few weeks in with my first baby was to use the Milky's milk catcher, or some people use the Haka on my non-nursing side. And so it would be like, I would get like 2 full ounces of foremilk on that side into that thing, and then that way when the baby switched to the other side, they were already like kind of getting to the hind milk, and that really helped with my foremilk imbalance too.
Yes, I definitely used the Haka very early on. Now I don't like it as much. For some reason I'm like sick of pumps.
Yeah, I guess. I think we all get to that point.
Yes, and so I'm like, if I'm at home, I'm like not interested in catching any extra milk. I'm like, the sheets will catch it. It's fine. But before I went back to work, I was pretty like psycho about trying to build a stash for her. Just because it was really important to me to keep her, breastfeeding, and to try not to use formula if I didn't absolutely have to. And so I was pretty adamant about using the Haka and pumping very early on. And yeah, it definitely worked for then. Now I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
You need a break from that pump sometimes.
Yeah. And I'm like 4 months postpartum, and yesterday, for the first time, I booked a flange fitting, and I did the consultation, and they have you send in pictures, and I realized that I've probably been using the wrong flange size for 4 months.
Oh goodness. How did you get fitted? Who did you get help with that?
We haven't actually had the meeting yet, the consult yet, but they have me. I'm going to look up the name. It is called Saving the Milk with Crystal Nelson.
Okay.
And so I can't even remember. I guess I found her on Instagram.
So you just do it virtually?
Yes. So they have you send in pictures, like holding your flange, like with your flange on with the pump off, and then like holding up a AA battery next to your nipple and a dime. And it's really cool. But when I did that and I put the flange on without, having just fed the baby or anything like that, and I realized, this is probably way too big. So yeah, it seems like it's going to be pretty straightforward. And I think for $20, I have my initial consult and then 10 days of 24/7 support. So
oh wow,
felt like a steal to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great thing to figure out that I think a lot of people don't realize. And if you're listening and you don't know what we're talking about the piece of the breast pump that goes onto your breast. It's called a flange, and they come in different sizes. And it doesn't necessarily depend on your breast size. It's more to do with your nipple and areola and all that. So somebody who's an expert in that sounds like a great peace of mind to just talk to them and get their input on the sizing.
Yes, and do not be deceived. Just because you are bigger chested does not mean you'll need a bigger flange.
Yeah.
I, for some reason, thought that was true, and it is not.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for sharing that. That was a great little bit of info at the end. We'll link to that site. And then on that note, are there any other resources that you wanted to share?
Yes. So because I've had a background in doula work, I feel like do as much prep during my pregnancy just because I had so much else going on emotionally and I didn't want to overwhelm myself with information. But prior to pregnancy, just like in my work as a doula, I had read, of course, I listened to the Birth Hour podcast forever and ever and ever. And then I have read The Birth Partner by Penny Simkin. And that was really helpful for helping my mom be an aid to me in labor because she ended up being my support person. And she had 6 children of her own, but, she'd never really supported anybody through a natural birth. And so that was pretty helpful. Ina May's Guide to Childbirth and Spiritual Midwifery. And then Mom Enough was a book that I was gifted. It's called Mom Enough, The Fearless Mother's Heart and Hope. It's a short book of stories or contributions from 7 moms. And it is faith-based, but it helped me work through some trials and worries that I had. And also The Business of Being Born. I suggest that to everybody that I know that's pregnant. Definitely watch it, regardless of if you want an epidural or, you want to be in a hospital, you don't want a midwife. I think it's still very helpful to kind of know your options, know, potential risks and benefits. And so I always suggest The Business of Being Born to everybody.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And then did you want to share where people can connect with you?
Yes. So on Instagram, my name is Naturally Bree. So NATURALLYBRI with 2 underscores. And it's just full of Olivia. And then I also, with my best friend, started this internet presence called Melanin Maternity TV. We're mostly a private Facebook group, but we do have an Instagram account too. But we had started it for Black moms specifically, to have a place to come together and to hold space with and for one another, because sometimes it seems like we don't really have a place elsewhere. And so we wanted to kind of facilitate that for moms. And we started it as a place for moms to come and go live during their births if they wanted to and things like that. But now we're just kind of, we just kind of speak with one another. We haven't had any live births, and I ended up not even going live in there. That's a long story. But it's a lot more complicated than you think. You think you just set up a camera and you go, but it's not that easy.
Yeah.
So anyway, we have that Melanin Maternity TV on Facebook and Instagram if anyone would want to connect with us there.
Okay, great. Send me the links to those and we'll put them on the show notes page as well.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. This kind of made my day.
Now I'm going to talk with Kim about Creighton Kids, today's sponsor. Hi, Kim. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Bryn. Happy to be here.
Yay. Well, I'm excited to talk about Creighton Kids and some decor advice. But before we get into that, will you tell my listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do at Creighton Kids?
Yes, I work at our corporate headquarters, which is based outside Chicago, and I am considered a senior kids stylist. I basically style photography and work between the buyers and the photo studio to make everything come to life. So I know the product pretty well. And I have an interior design background, but I'm also a mom. I have 2 girls. One is 3.5, Josephine, and then I have May, who is about 10 months. So I'm a big fan of your podcast as well.
Thank you. And I guess you've been in the nursery designing phase pretty recently yourself, too.
Yes. I kind of consider it never done. It's just ever evolving. But yeah, it's probably the most fun room in our house as well.
It's so
to design
fun.
and be in. So
whenever we've moved, it's always been like the first room that we get put together, or the kids' rooms, or especially the baby, because they don't have any opinions. So you can kind of make it the way you want to make it.
Exactly. And get all their stuff out and ready, so that one less thing to worry about. But
yeah. All right. Well, we have talked a bit on here about nursery furniture and gotten advice from other members of your team. So today I want to focus on decor, since that sounds like it's your specialty. So how do you recommend getting started with nursery decor?
Yeah, so there's no real hard and fast rule, but we usually recommend starting with a wall color that you love. So that will just really set the mood for the space and help drive the rest of the decor in the room. But along with that, a great rug will do so much of the heavy lifting in terms of adding color and texture and warmth to your nursery. So my tip is don't be afraid to go real big with your rug, or as big as you can get in the room, because a large scale rug really adds that cozy layer of softness to the nursery and will come in handy when your baby's ready to start crawling around. I also like to think of the rug as a fifth wall, because it's an opportunity to bring color and pattern to the room if you go with a more neutral wall color.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have thought to use a rug in a room that already has carpet, but it actually does add so much to the room, and it protects your carpet from all the things that babies and toddlers do.
Oh, yes, definitely. And just adds more texture as well. So layering, don't be afraid to layer. Sometimes people even layer up 2 rugs. You could do a much more like low pile rug with a fluffier one on top to add that coziness.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned wall color, and I know that removable wallpaper is also really on trend right now, and you guys carry some options there. So how do you suggest selecting that? And is it difficult to apply? I know they say it's removable. Is it really removable? What advice do you have on that?
Yes. So we carry a few, and they're from some companies that maybe a lot of listeners have heard of, like Chasing Paper and Temp Paper. And it's definitely removable, like it says. I just got done installing some in our playroom, and I messed up so many times and was able to just peel it down and put it back to line up those seams just right. And there was no damage to the wallpaper at all. So it definitely can be removed easily. And I think that's also a big reason why it's so popular. You can also get that like vibrant pop of color that you really want in your room with like a very low commitment. So if you change up your mind later, you could even use that wallpaper somewhere else in your home if you want to change up the overall scheme of your kids' room. So it's definitely a great tool for decor, and we like to put it on accent walls as well a lot, just to get that big splash of personality. But as far as choosing what you want, I think here's a place you can really have fun with color and pattern. So it should be all about expressing your personal style, because it's just a great and super safe way to get a little more daring than you normally would.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite wallpapers that you guys offer?
Yes. I mean, I kind of love them all for their own.
I know it's so hard to choose.
Characters. Yes, it is. But the Chasing Paper Speckles is this really cute little print with little black polka dots that just might add that touch of edge to your room that you might be looking for. It almost looks like an animal print. We have this really sweet one called Leaping Bunnies that have big scale bunnies with a light pink background. That's perfect for a nursery. And I just installed the cutout floral in our playroom. That is just this big, bold graphic that I think just it adds what any room might be lacking. It gives you a place to rest your eyes. And the color palette is really, really great.
Yeah, I love what you said about reusing it in another part of your house. I would not have thought of that.
Yes. I have a friend who did that, and she took it down in her hallway and put it in as kitchen backsplash. So
cool.
The options are endless.
Yeah, that black and white speckles would be cool in like a guest bathroom, I think.
Oh, yes.
All right, you're inspiring me. We're trying to kind of redo our game room into a schoolroom because it seems like we're going to be homeschooling next year. And so I want to make it really cute. So I'm going to have to go choose something.
That would be a great way to do it.
Yeah. All right. So another big thing that comes up a lot is storage and how to make that kind of fit in with your theme and your decor.
Yeah, so we have a ton of great storage pieces. And storage can be, shelving. It could be bins on the floor. It could be a bookcase. So as far as adding some to your room, you could experiment with different options. So if you're trying to come up with something to put on display, you could add some big shelving, or you can frame up some of your kids' artwork or any artwork that you have and love to make a gallery wall. It's just a place to really express yourself as well. So with like open shelving, you can display some special toys on these shelves or books or pretty storage baskets if you like things to look a little tidier. So we like shelving units that can be modified to your needs and can grow with your kids. So we have some options that stack or for example, we have this art gallery rail that is magnetic and it looks like a bar. And basically you can hang prints or kids art from it and just change it out as needed. It's super simple. Some other ideas to display art would be like you could use pretty magnets or clothespins to display artwork and photos. But we have a great selection of decorative hooks where you could hang up any extra cute outfits that maybe your baby doesn't wear all that often, but you just love the look of and it's extra special.
Or like antique dresses from your grandma or something.
Exactly. And another, like once they grow out of it, that's a good way to display it because you still love to look at it. So, but yeah, we have a lot of choices there.
Yeah, it seems like using your walls for storage is a good idea rather than just thinking about a dresser or something like that.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially the nursery tends to be one of the smallest, or in a lot of cases, the smallest room in the house. So you have to get creative with ways to show things off and keep things neat.
Yeah. Okay, and then what kind of lighting works best in a nursery?
Yeah, so we love incorporating lighting that doubles as a statement piece just so that you can kind of get lighting and decor all in one. For example, you can add a beautiful pendant light to your room if you have that overhead light because it will cast a warm glow throughout the nursery, but will also add a lot of style even when the lights are off. We're seeing a lot of like oversized pendants trending in nurseries, and it's a real cool way to add that personal touch to your room. You could also layer in small little decorative lamps that look beautiful on a bookshelf or a side table. That's a way to like have soft mood lighting when you're putting baby to sleep or when you're having quiet time. I tend to not like to turn on my overhead light when it's time to wind down for the day. And we have this beautiful night light that's like a ceramic art piece. It's an elephant, and it has like the most wonderful warm glow when it's on. We have quite a bit of pendant lights too to choose from.
Yeah, I definitely recommend some kind of little glowy type light that you can use for those middle of the night feedings too, so you can see what you're doing, but not wake baby up completely.
Absolutely, and jar them with the bright light. So
right,
and jar yourself. So
yeah, just pretend like it's not really happening. Everybody goes back to sleep.
Yep, exactly.
All right. So last question. You mentioned layering in things and kind of bringing it all together. So what kind of decor is most popular right now, and what's something people might be looking for as far as a statement piece or I know some people will find one quilt and then they'll design their whole nursery around it. But what are you seeing right now?
Yeah. Right now we're seeing like toys becoming a part of the overall nursery decor. Mm-hmm. Mostly we're talking about like those well-made, sustainable wooden toys that they tend to get overlooked when planning out a nursery, but they look so awesome on display. And we love to see like heirlooms getting incorporated. And like you were saying about the vintage dresses. So they add that like classic style and natural warmth to the room to mix old and new. But you know, as like a bonus, if you display any of your own treasures or family heirlooms, those special toys can be wonderful objects to talk about and tell stories about with your little one as part of your night routine or as they grow older. So, but I think just in general, fill your nursery with what you love and what makes you happy, because the design will fall into place around that.
Yeah, I love that. And some of those, like you said, the kind of heirloom toys, really well built, wooden toys usually can be a little bit more expensive, but they last for, generations. They're beautiful. And I really think with like toddlers and babies, you just want like a handful of toys on display in the room or they get overwhelmed.
Right. Yeah. Not to get too cluttery or overstimulate them. But most of the time with these wooden toys, they're also something you like to look at as well.
Right. I know, they're all so pretty.
Yeah. Like we have the natural wood baby beads. I'm always bringing those out. And then the etched blocks that we sell are also like little pieces of art in a little wooden block. There's illustrations and numbers and letters, but in like a beautiful font. And I have those all over our room too. And we recommend that to our customers, both as like a toy, because babies eventually love to stack things, and as just a display. I use them as bookends. I mean, they kind of hold up books.
Yeah. I've seen people like spell out baby's name with them and stuff too. It's so cute.
That's very cute.
All right. Well, I could scroll on your website for like hours and hours. Everything's so beautiful. So thank you for helping us kind of find a few favorites.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much again to Abrielle for sharing her birth story today, and for Kim coming on and chatting with me about Creighton Kids and designing a nursery. If you want more information from today's episode, you can head over to thebirthhour.com and search for Abrielle's name in the search bar. Again, we'd love to have you join us with our listener supporter group at patreon.com/birthhour. And if you're in need of an online childbirth course, you can find that at thebirthhour.com/course. I'm planning to release some bonus episodes in the coming weeks to share more about the course as well. So if you're looking for more information about that, keep an eye out for those soon too. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.